أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يسألونك عن الساعة أيان مرساها فيما أنت من ذكراها إلى ربك منتهاها صدق الله العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد وبعد رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي آمين يا رب العالمين أما بعد Alhamdulillah, brothers and sisters in Islam, we are here in the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after praying the Salat al-Asr on such a hot day. Alhamdulillah, it is a blessing that we are seeing temperatures of such high degrees. So really, we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for allowing us to stay here after the Salat al-Asr, and inshallah it will be only a half an hour, maximum 40 minutes introduction to what is to come in the next few weeks, inshallah. And the topic, as I mentioned yesterday and today, it is really an important topic, interesting topic, and it is a topic that always brings people curiosity, questioning regarding the minor signs and the major signs of the Day of Judgment. But before we proceed, we should really refocus ourselves on what is the purpose of learning these minor signs as long as the major signs. And we know all these signs have come to us from the sayings of the Prophet ﷺ in the various ahadith. Some major signs have been mentioned in the Quran, but not many. But most of them have come down to us from the sayings of Rasulullah ﷺ. So what is the main purpose of learning these signs, the signs of the Day of Judgment? As we know, the Day of Judgment, there's no doubt about it, it will happen. It is something which has been told to us in the Holy Quran and the sayings of the Prophet ﷺ. But there are certain things which will happen. And the ulama, the scholars, they have divided them into three categories. I mentioned the major signs and minor signs, but one of the scholars, Mufti Shafi Rahim, he mentioned that there are three categories. The first one are those signs which are the far distance, and those which are very, very far away from the Day of Judgment. For example, the Prophet of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his birth, his death, the revelation of the Quran. These are all distant signs. And then there are those which are in between. They are called the sort of the in-between signs, and then there are signs which are the closest. So those we can class as the major signs. So three types. But today I will not go into any of the signs, because I just want to jig our minds at what is the purpose of learning this information. What will you benefit from this? Whenever we read about something, there must be a benefit for us as human beings in this dunya and also in the hereafter. So one of the main reasons that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us about the Day of Judgment is to allow us to prepare. So that on the Day of Judgment we don't have any excuse that we were busy doing certain things, we were busy in our lives, in our work, in our businesses, in our studies, in our families. We have a time frame in order to prepare for this. And also one of the other reasons is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to increase in iman. So all the signs which we see, they should increase us in iman. If it is opposite, if it is making us lower our iman, i.e. if it is making us scared of the Day of Judgment, or if it is making us doubt the Day of Judgment, that this is not really the objectives, this is not the purpose of why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us these signs in this world. When we hear, obviously, in this dunya about certain happenings around the world, in particular the minor signs, we start to think that subhanAllah, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told His Prophet of these signs many hundreds of years, 1,400 years ago. What was the hikmah, the wisdom behind this? And the Prophet ﷺ mentions in one of the famous hadith of the Sa'ah, of the Day of Judgment, that if you see the Day of Judgment coming and you're about to plant a seed, then plant it. But don't say that the Day of Judgment is coming and I should give up everything. This is what happens sometimes as Muslim ummah. We sometimes become deactivate from the dunya, because we think that the Day of Judgment is coming we shouldn't really be doing anything. Rather, it is the opposite. When we know the day of judgment is coming, we should increase in good, in hasanat, in the good deeds. And we know the Sahaba, one of the Sahaba, which I will mention later on, he used to always ask about the negative things that would happen in this world, so that he could do the positive, he could do the opposite. Not so that he can become depressed. Sometimes we hear the big signs of the Dajjal and the Mahdi, and we start to become scared. Especially when you tell these stories to your children, they become quite scared, and they become more sort of curious at what is going to happen. Tell me more about the Day of Judgment and what is to happen before this great day. So Allah mentions in the surah which I mentioned, they ask you regarding the Day of Judgment. But one of the Bedouins, he came to the Prophet ﷺ, and he was asking him the same question, that when will be the Day of Judgment be? And the Prophet replied to him, what have you prepared for this day? What have you prepared in the a'mal, in the good deeds, that you are asking about it? You are so curious about it, but rather you should look, what have you prepared in this dunya in order to move on to the next life, which is the hereafter. But before the hereafter, there is this time in between, which is called the Judgment Day, where the Hisab Kitab will be done. You ask about those 5 things, how you spend your wealth, your health, your time, your money, everything will be asked about. How you lived in this dunya. Did you waste your time in amusement and play, or did you actually use it in order to become nearer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So these are the main 2 goals that I want to reiterate, is the qurba, the nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to make yourself aware of Him, of His might, of His power, of His greatness, and also to make yourself fearful in order that you worship Him Jalla wa ala alone, that you don't become complacent, that yes, you are Muslim, you are mu'min, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will look at you with rahmah, but you have to do some amal in this dunya, because as the ulama, they mention that iman without amal has no fruits in the hereafter. You must do some action in order for you to acquire the Jannah inshallah in the hereafter, and in order that you acquire the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is just a preface, that not to get scared, and anything that we mention is a disclaimer. Don't see it as a negative, rather try to change it into a positive, and see that how you can work with these signs, not against them, but with these signs, in order to make yourself better in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So 2 books we'll be using. The first book which I have chosen, and this is not going to be a 1, 2, 3 week, maybe it will take 6 weeks, Allah knows how long it will take. The book which I have chosen is Bidayah wa Nihaya by Ibn Kathir. And this is a history book which really, he starts from the time of Adam alayhi salam, and he comes down to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and then he moves on to the Sahaba, Tabi'een, and up to his time. Hafiz Ibn Kathir rahimahullah ta'ala, he was one of the students of Imam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala. He was really a master in the science of hadith, of tafsir, in history. He had many sciences under his belt, subhanallah. So this is one of the books which we'll use, and also I will make reference to some of the other books. There are many books which have been written on this topic, especially in Arabic, in Urdu. In English we have some books which have been written. This book has been translated into English. It is actually just a chapter from Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya, the signs, Alamatul Sughra and Alamatul Kubra, both the major and the minor sign. How the author, he goes around describing the signs, is that he firstly he brings the Quranic ayats which mention the Day of Judgment, and then he brings a couple of the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which gives you a sort of a background of how we should look at this topic. And the first hadith which he mentions in his book is the hadith of the Bedouin which I mentioned earlier, that he asks about the hour, and the Prophet ﷺ says to him, what have you prepared? Have you prepared any prayer, any zakat, any siyam, any sadaqat? And he says no. So he answers no. So he's honest. He's not like me and you. He's honest. He says no, I have not prepared anything for the Day of Judgment. But he answers in another way. He says, but I do one thing, and I love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I love the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So the Prophet ﷺ heard his response, the Bedouin's response. He says to him, in that case you will be with the one who you love. You will be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This hadith had a really big impact on the Sahaba. The Sahaba, when they heard this hadith, what they had in their mind was, yes, so the Day of Judgment is coming, but we should have the love of of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because ultimately He will be the one who will judge us. He will be the one that will call us in front of Him Jalla wa ala. He will ask us. If we love Him, then obviously we'll do things which will please Him. If we love someone, we're not going to do something which angers Him. And if we claim to love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're going to do things that He wants us to do. And again, with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's the best of examples for us. If we claim to love him, then we will look and we will learn what did he do in his life. How did he treat people? How did he treat others? Then we will try to emulate and try to copy his ways, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then there's another hadith which he mentions after these ayahs, which Allah mentions that we are becoming closer and closer to the reckoning. اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر. So this is one of the signs of the splitting of the moon was a sign of the Day of Judgment. اقترب للناس حسابهم وهم في غفلة معرضون. This is Allah reminding us that you are coming closer to your hisab, but yet you are heedless of it, you are turning away from it, you are ignorant of it. Allah also tells us, only those who wish to hasten to it believe, not in those who believe in it. And those who believe hold in it in awe and know that it is the truth. And they know that the Qiyamah is the truth. So you must believe in it. So one thing is you must have Iman in those 7 pillars of Iman, and one of them is the Day of Judgment. آمنت بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله واليوم الآخر والقدر خيره وشره من الله تعالى والبعث بعد الموت. So the two are connected, the Ba'ath بعد الموت and the يوم القيامة واليوم الآخر. The second hadith which he mentions, and this really gives us the reality of this dunya and this life and this age of ours of 60, 70 years is mentioned in this hadith. And the Prophet ﷺ once saw a young man and the Sahaba were inquiring about the Day of Judgment. And he said, look at this young man. If he lives, he will grow old before he sees your last hour coming to. I.e., he will pass away without seeing the last hour. By this, what he meant? What does Prophet ﷺ mean by this? He says that the death and then the entering the hereafter, this is actually your Qiyamah. This is the start of your Qiyamah. Because once you leave this dunya, you have no connection to this world, and your muhasabah, your reckoning starts from the qabr. Even before the Day of Judgment, you have this period of time in the qabr where you will be asked about those 3 things, which we have mentioned, that who is your Rabb, what is your deen, and who is this man, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, do you recognize him or not? So some people say that when the person has died, as I mentioned, his judgment will start. And this is the correct meaning of the hadith, because this young man, he died and there was no qiyamah. There was no qiyamah after this. The word as-sa'ah has been mentioned many times in the Quran, and it could mean, many times it means the Day of Judgment, the reckoning itself. So there's many, it could mean the time itself, the years and the time, the age, but mostly it means the Day of Judgment. Also the Hafiz ibn Kathir, he mentions a few other hadiths which brings us really closer to understanding the reality. And there's a famous hadith that has been mentioned in the 2 books of Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, that the angel Jibreel came to the Prophet ﷺ, and he asked him, he came to him in a guise of a Bedouin, in disguise of a Bedouin. And he was a person, the whitest of clothes, there was no sort of trace of a traveler, he's had beautiful hair. This was Jibreel that came to the Prophet ﷺ in order to teach the Sahaba about the religion. So he asks him about Islam, Iman and Ihsan. And the Prophet ﷺ answered regarding these 3 questions. What is Islam? What is Iman? What is Ihsan? But then he also asks him about the Day of Judgment, the hour. He asked him about the hour. The Prophet ﷺ says, the one who's questioning does not know more than the one who's questioned. We both do not know. But then Jibreel asked him further, give me some signs, tell us some signs. And the Prophet ﷺ described the signs which we will discuss next week. So what are these are the minor signs which were described by the Prophet ﷺ. And many times they would ask him ﷺ about the signs. Sometimes he would get up, as we know from the next hadith, that he stood up one day and he spoke to us. And he told us everything that was, this is really the rahmah, the wisdom, that he told us everything that was going to happen up to the hour, up to the day of judgment. And he left nothing unsaid. But some of the listeners, they learned it by heart, they remembered it, others, they forgot it. And he says, Hudayfa, he says, I do not remember it completely, because we're going to mention the hadith of Hudayfa later on. He mentions some of the aspects of the as-sa'a. He said, I don't remember everything. But sometimes it springs to my mind. Sometimes I remember it, just as one may remember and recognize the face of a man whom he has left and he has forgot about. And when he comes back, he remembers. So this is mentioned in one of the books of hadith Muslim. And again, similarly, there's another narration that in the Salat al-Asr, the Prophet ﷺ led them in the prayer. Then he stood up after Salat. So this time now between Salat al-Asr and Salat al-Maghrib, he stood up to sunset. And he mentioned everything that was to happen up till the day of judgment. And he left nothing unsaid. Again, some of us remembered, others we could not remember. And he told us one thing. So the narrator, he mentions one thing, which the Prophet ﷺ mentions to them, that O people, this world is full of temptations, and Allah has put you in this dunya as His khulafa, as His vicegerents, as His representatives in this world. And He will see how you acted in this dunya. So again, reference is given to muhasabah, in the day of judgment, that He will see to you how you acted in this dunya. So guard yourself against the temptation of this dunya, of this world, and of also he warned them against the temptation, the fitna of the women. Towards the end of his speech, he said, the sun is about to set, it was time of Maghrib. And what did he say? This is really the important bit. He says that what remains of this world compared to what has passed is like what remains of this day compared to what has passed. I.e., the time is very short. So he's warning, he's telling them that the time is very short. Don't think that you have many hundreds and thousands of years. So this time is very short. The time between the sunset and the time after Salat al-Asr, he was giving this wa'ad, this nasiha to his Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala ajma'in. In spite of all these ahadith, we know that no one knows the time of the Sa'ah. People claim to know that this is the time where the doomsday will arrive. No one has the knowledge of this except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When He wills, it will happen. When He has decreed for it to happen, it will happen. And there is no going back. There's a saying, there's an ayah that it will happen in quick succession. It doesn't have to take long. We say the ayahs, the signs can happen straight away, one after the other. Or if He wills, He cannot even, bring the ayahs out. It's up to Him. Who are we to ask Him? It is up to Him how He wants to bring the day of judgment upon us. So in spite of all this, we do not know how much time is left, but what we should be doing, we should be preparing. We should be preparing in the ibadah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We should be preparing our children, nourishing them, making sure that the tarbiyah is to the best of our abilities, and have that self-consciousness, that taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And may He allow us to prepare ourselves. Really, this is really, we should always make dua that may He allow us to prepare for the eventuality of the hereafter and the hisab kitab. May He make it easy for us, that we do not be asked about something which was out of our capacity, our ability, because He will only ask about what was under our capability. He will not ask about what was beyond our reach. Moving on, then the author, he moves on. And he starts to introduce the second chapter, which is the description of the minor tribulation, which will happen to all of us. All of us are going to suffer with these fitans. And inshallah, I'll mention this before we finish off, that how he describes them in such a detail that some of them are in reference to this dunya, but there are also fitans which will happen in the hereafter. The fitna in the qabr, the adab al-qabr, the punishment of the qabr is also mentioned, and then the biggest of adab, which is in the hereafter. So again, going back to the Sahaba, Hudayfa ibn al-Yaman, he says that people, so I mentioned this earlier, that people used to ask the Prophet ﷺ about good things, but I used to ask him about the bad things. Because why did he used to ask about the bad things? Because he used to be scared that they might overtake him. So that he might actually start doing these bad things. So he was trying to keep away from these bad things. So I said, O Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, we were lost in ignorance in Jahiliyyah before Islam and even. Then when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought us to Islam, this was out of His mercy, out of His rahmah. He asks the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, will some evil come after this good, after Islam? Yeah, will some evil come after this good thing? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said yes. And I asked, and will some good come after that evil? He said yes, but it will be tainted with some evil. So 3 stages. Then I asked, how will it be tainted? He said there will be some people who will lead people on other path of which I have obligated from my path. And he said you will see good and bad in them. You will see both in them. And I asked, will some evil come after that good? He said yes. Some people will be standing and calling at the gates of the hellfire. Whoever responds to their call, they will throw them into the hellfire. And I said, O Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, describe these people to us. So he wants to know who are these people who will be calling at the gates of hellfire to the Jahannam. He said, they will be from your own people. They will be from your own people. And will speak their own language, our language. And then he asked them, what do you advise me to do at this time of fitan? Should I live to see that time? He said, stick to the main body, the jama'ah of the Muslims and the leader and the Imam. So stick to the jama'ah, the consensus, the body of the Muslims and the Imam, the leader, if he is present. I asked, what if there is no main body, the main jama'ah, and there is no leader? So this is really, he's giving him advice that a situation might come that there is no jama'ah, there is no imam, there is no leader of the Muslims. He said to him, isolate yourself from all these sects, even if you have to eat the roots of trees until death overcomes you while you were in that. So we know Hudayfa, he passed away not seeing these things. So he was only asking about them in order to prepare himself. So many things which we see in this hadith, it really it advises us that in times of trials you will see the jama'ah, it will be divided into sects, many sects, and we will come to the sects later on, that how we describe the 71, 72, 73 sects, and what to do in these times of trial. This is also a fitan. It's one of the fitans of the Day of Judgment. So we are asked about the youngsters in our times, that how come Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has divided the Muslims into so many sects? What is the reason behind it? What is the wisdom? So we have the answer in the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, of Hudayfa radiallahu. He wants to again test the Muslims, because it will be a severe test in yourself, in your iman, in your Islam. It will be a test in your children. How you look after your children. Your children are verily innama amwalukum wa awladukum. What you have in your possession is also a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So again, coming back to this hadith of Hudayfa radiallahu ta'ala, he says that you must take extra care when it comes to your halal and your haram, to what you eat. So even if you have to eat the roots of trees out of fear, then you must stick to this. So very, very important that when you are overcome with the trials, with the fitans, and we know at this situation now, the Muslims, we don't have a Imam al-Adil. There is no Imam al-Adil. There are many leaders who came and who went, who lived in this dunya, and they tried their best in order to bring the Muslims together. Some were successful and others were unsuccessful. But again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will only ask them what was under their capacity, their capability. We know the jama'ah of the Muslims, we have many sects upon us. So what is the advice to all is that we should stick to the Quran and the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam without delving into the sub-sects and dividing further. When we see discord within the jama'ah, we should try to always, it is said in the hadith that the one who is standing is better than the one who is running towards the fitna, and the one who is sitting is better than the one who is standing. This will come later on. At what steps? Because it's fair enough that we describe the trials and the ayahs, the signs, but there has to be some practicalities of what are we going to do in these times of fitan, which we will describe inshallah in the next few weeks. I'll finish off with one of the other hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this hadith is mentioned many times. People misquote this hadith for their own reasonings, for their own purpose. And it is the hadith about that Islam started off as a strange thing. So this is the Rawi is Abdullah ibn Masud radiallahu ta'ala. And he says, the Prophet ﷺ says that Islam began as something strange, something ajib, something which was remarkable, something which was not the norm at the time of the Jahili Arabs. And he said it will also revert to being strange at the end as it was in the beginning. So it will become strange again towards the end. So as it was strange in the beginning with the Prophet ﷺ and his Sahaba, as we know how much difficulties they went through, how much persecution. Again, so we see that Islam is starting to become strange again. When you say to someone that you are Muslim, they look at you and think, you might be someone from another dunya, another world. Why are you praying? Why you are fasting? Why you are still doing these actions which were done many hundreds of thousands of years ago? So it has returned back as something strange. But he gives glad tidings. So good tidings, tuba, for the strangers, for those who, in spite of all the tribulations, the trials, they stick to their core fundamentals. So they call you fundamentalists because you stick to the Quran and the Sunnah. So this is really something we should be very careful. We should be very keen that we do not upset Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because we may upset people in this dunya for few years, few days, but after a while they will become back to normal with you. But when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is upset with you, it takes a lot to make Him radi, to make Him happy from you through tawbah, through repentance. So be careful who you ally your ties with. The final part of the hadith was mentioned. He says, the Prophet is asked, who are these strangers? Who are the strangers? He says that these are the ones who break away from their people at the times of fitan, their tribes, the tribalism, nationalism. Literally it is mentioned here people, and this people refers to the nationalism, any sort of ism that was present at that time or is present here, and you keep away from that in order to protect yourself from the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to keep yourself safe on the Quran and the Sunnah, on the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for the sake of Islam. So you leave all that. You leave your family ties, your tribalism, anything which goes against Islam. You should leave that. You have to leave that for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This hadith was mentioned by Anas and Abu Huraira. It is a hadith which was mentioned in the book of Ibn Majah radiallahu ta'ala anhu. So what we take from the last two hadith, before we delve next week into the minor signs, is that there will be many confusions, many conflicts, and obviously you will have this battle with yourself firstly. Before you have this battle with the external world, you will have this battle with yourself, and that is when when you overcome your own fitans, your own temptations. That is when you will know that you can confront the external battles. So firstly, you must work on yourself as a youngster, as a child, as a young man, as an adult, as a husband, as a wife. You should always battle with you. We have many battles with ourselves. We have many struggles within ourselves. The struggle just to come to the masjid is a struggle. We know in Ramadan we can come to the masjid with ease. But out of Ramadan, in the month of Shawwal, how difficult it becomes. So that is a struggle. We have struggled with our children, how to make sure that they stick to the Islam, they keep to the Jama'ah. I mean, you should see it outside the community that we are living in, subhanAllah, how much far away we are from the deen. We have become so, they call us liberal, but liberal is not the word for it. We have left the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and everything should be done with the wasatiyah, not without going into one extreme or the other, without going too extreme in the deen, and also without being too loose. So this middle path should be taken. We see the struggle with our families, our children, how difficult it has become in school, in the madaris, to keep them, keep that love of Islam in their hearts. These are all struggles, and also the basic struggles of having to live as a Muslim, it is apparent, we all see it in our lives as working people, as people who go out. But again, this is something that shouldn't, as I mentioned earlier, shouldn't put you in a negative frame of mind. Rather, it should put you in a positive frame of mind. Don't think that this is a bad thing. This is something which is good for you. This is something which will, and again, the main purpose of a fitna is to bring you out the other side clean from any sins, any doubts, any mischiefs. What happens is, I see a lot, is that when we are faced with trials and tribulations, we let it take over us, and it takes over us very quickly, and we become depressed. The mental stress becomes high, and we don't know how to cope with it. And we rely on other people to pray upon us. Rather, you should be yourself should pray upon you. The best of ruqya is what you pray on yourself. The Prophet ﷺ, yes, he asked his wife Aisha radiallahu once or twice to recite upon this when he was quite ill, when he was very ill, when he was unable to recite upon himself. This is the only time, but rather, if you want to be from one of those, 70,000 who will enter Jannah without hisab kitab, then you must take things, practically with your own self. You should look at yourself, and inshallah, with the help of Allah, it will come. Don't think that I can't do it. This thing that I can't do it, or how can I do it? It should never be negative. So inshallah, when we look at the minor and major signs next week, don't look at them as doom and gloom. That the qiyamah is here. Look at it as a positive thing, because I don't want people to get scared. Our children here who might have nightmares. We don't want you to have nightmares. We want you to look at it in a good way, in order that you learn from it, and then you can remember it. Maybe 20, 30, whenever you are older, when you are elder, you might see things which are changing in this dunya, and you might realize that yes, this was something which was said by the Prophet ﷺ. Again, this is a proof of his nubuwah, of his risala, of his finality, that he has given so much information to his ummah. Really, we are lucky. We have the other ummahs who had no information regarding these signs which we are given to us in the books of the hadith. In each book of hadith there is a kitab al-fitan. Towards the end, it's always given in the end. Sahih Bukhari has it towards the end, Muslim has it towards the end, and all is about, in Sahih Muslim there are many hadiths, and they're all mutawatir, there are Sahih hadith, in Sahih Muslim there are hadith, but we do not pick all, we just get a few of them in order to have an idea that what we are living through and what we should expect. Those signs that are still to come, what do we expect in the future. So I hope and I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us safe in these times of fitan. May He allow us to seek the knowledge, the beneficial knowledge, for His sake alone, and may He allow us to follow in the footstep of the Quran and the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and may He clear. We are all suffering with some sort of parishani, with some sort of illnesses. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cure us from our illnesses, and may He forgive our sins that we have committed. Really, the sins, when we make tawbah from our sins, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He opens up a path of forgiveness for us. So we should always look to Him Jalla wa ala. And next week, inshallah, we will cover the minor signs, and then the following week we have an external speaker who will be covering the life of Khalid ibn Walid, rahimahullah wa ta'ala. He will cover the biography of one of the great soldiers, the great commanders of Islam. Then the following week, the last 2 weeks, we will finish off the major signs. And in the major signs, there are many things which need to be discussed properly, that we understand, because sometimes you can take the hadith literally, otherwise you can take it and you can try to interpret the meanings of the hadith, which many of the scholars have done, which we will look at inshallah from the 2 books which I have mentioned. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you for coming here in this Saturday night on this very beautiful day. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you the hasanat in this dunya and also in the hereafter. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from all evil, whether it is the apparent evil or the hidden evil. May Allah subhanahu allow us to continue our struggle until the eventuality, which is the death. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to die with the iman and the qawl la ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah before we فحسب إن شاء الله. الله لا إله إلا الأحد الصمد الذي لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. اللهم آت نفوسنا تقواها أنت خير من زكاها أنت وليها ومولاها. اللهم إنا نعوذ من فتنة المحيا والممات ونعوذ بك من فتنة المسيح الدجال. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إنا كنا من الظالمين. ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما. سبحان الله بحمده سبحان الله العظيم. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأستغفرك وأتوب إليك. وصلى الله تعالى على خير خلقه محمد وآله وأصحابه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.